Hello there everyone, and welcome back to yet another beautiful video. Today we are going over some art philosophy, some general philosophy, while I sew. What are we sewing today? We have a few things. One, I have a vest I'm making myself, so I have to put some buttons on. I'm going to hand stitch the lining, and I also have a pair of boots that need to be mended. These are from a brand called Brahm Cover, and as they have used a vegan alternative to leather, it has started to come apart at some of the spaces where you normally see cracks in shoes, just over time wear and tear. I'm going to try sewing those up, see if I can mend it myself. I think this is a great point of departure into today's talks. Right, these are material items. Every time, especially when dealing with clothing and finer clothing that is using natural fabrics, they will naturally decay over time. And I think that's great. That's something that shouldn't be scared of, as it's a natural part of these objects that we interact with so thoroughly in our lives. And you also get 2 points of departure then when you're faced with something. You can either say, okay, that's that, and let go and sort of move on, have a disattachment from these material attachments that we've created. But you can also, as in my case, choose to mend it, and you are infusing a part of yourself then, a part of your time into these pieces that maybe you were just wearing, and now they have so much more of a personal aspect to them. What, of course, do we use to sew these items? And that is the needle. The needle is such an interesting instrument. It's such an interesting tool for quite a few reasons. One, it is an extension of ourself. It is something that we feasibly could not do with our own bodily organs, which is weaved through very fine material. So it's fundamentally an extension of ourself. Further though, it is an extension of ourself, a tool and instrument we use to create more extensions for ourselves. It is a propagator of extensions, despite being an extension itself. It helps us make clothing. Of course, you could poke someone with it, but that's not its intended purpose, at least, that the maker had in mind, but also there, who knows. And so this tool, this instrument that is now a part of us, helps us create things that will be further extensions of itself. It helps us make vests. It helps us fix the items that are an extension of ourselves, especially when clothing is now seen, and I relegate now to, the past few hundred years, is such an important extension of ourselves that creates such a distinction of who we are based off of what we're wearing. It's quite a unique instrument. And that's where I think philosophy is also quite beautiful. It is an instrument in itself. It's a lens. It allows you to view certain things in different ways that you weren't viewing them before. Just like the needle. All of a sudden, as I'm talking on such an important object, we have a deeper, different view, a different lens is taken to look at this needle. And that's why I believe philosophy is so important. You are able to not necessarily decipher, I wouldn't say the purpose of philosophy is necessarily understand something or make this hidden connection. I believe it allows us to view the things that we interact with every day in a different lens, in a different way, in a different light. Of course, you have to be careful with philosophy. There is a Greek Stoic philosopher, Epictetus. As you all know, I cannot pronounce anything on here when it comes to names, so I don't know if you were expecting me to get that. But one of the quotes that he has in this quick discourses from him is quite interesting, and it goes along the lines of, you would be extremely upset if I were to give away your body, your bodily control, to a random person on the street. So why do you allow that to happen with your mind? And I think it goes further than just uncritically looking at ideas, but I think it goes into this concept of, I work out my body, I take care of it, but most importantly, I stretch afterwards. I make sure I'm not hurting my body. And so why do I not do the same for my mind? And so with philosophy, you have to make sure that you are not falling into the trappings of false connections or things that could lead you down a very negative path. And so it's just as important to practice philosophy as it's important to be safe while practicing philosophy. One of the 4 now videos I'm working on right now that will be coming out hopefully sometime soon, it won't be soon, deals with a tool or an instrument. I know I keep saying instrument quite a lot here, and just to give a quick definition, it would be something you can use to analyze or achieve something. So in this case, it is a linguistical instrument that can help you discern connections that do not actually exist. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because there will be a whole video on it. But like I was saying, I think it's very important to take care of your mind if you practice philosophy. I wouldn't call myself a philosopher even yet. You need many hours. I almost said dull, but I wouldn't call it dull, where you can just sit and ponder on items. I think there's such a tendency nowadays because of how debates are held, at least in our modern cultural zeitgeist, and the concept of morals being so solidified, crystallized into view. And I feel that's very harmful, because that's where philosophy can be helpful. You are trying to question what's around you. Once again, you must be careful with those questions. You aren't trying to make false judgments and false comparisons, but you are trying to, or harmful comparisons, let me emphasize that, to you or others. But you are creating an environment where you are able to understand through different lenses different concepts in new ways. Right? You aren't even trying necessarily to create a new concept. You are trying to understand the ones that already exist in new ways, rather than just accepting them at face value. I have quite an interesting theory when it comes to how I interact with my art. I have quite a few. Of course, I had for a very long time, and still to some extent, the issue of morals with selling my art. But another thing I like to do is whenever I realize I do not like something in art, I see something that continuously annoys me, and in this case it would be text on clothing or even in art, I will try to then implement that into my art because I don't like it, to push myself and to have a new viewing of that interaction in the world of art, in the realm of art. And so what I've really started on for quite a while now is within the drawings that I do. I try to do a drawing every day, or at least draw every day, implementing text into them. And over time, it slowly came from just words, phrases. I'm always obsessed with including Latin phrases into my drawings. Then it quickly became poetry of sorts. and now even some philosophy. So I wrote a very small, improper, harsh treatise on a unique view on morals in one of my last drawings. And I guess we can go over that right now, because we're on the topic of both morals and philosophy and art. What a coincidence. It's almost like I'm reading off some points I want to talk about here. So this is an excerpt from what I wrote in one of my more recent drawings. Mother Nature, that has deserted us in the ability to mimic her beautiful patterns, so gives us our fatal attraction to morals. Patterns we hold so true, so nature-like to the disciple, that to break them is unhuman, a fundamental departure from our repetitive being. In this seeking of a perfection not bestowed on us, look at how much harm and breakage of patterns has occurred. Our morals then can only start at 2 points. These points are a rage against nature's 2 most prevalent patterns, life and death. And then I get into a whole section on that, but I think the most important out of this is then the only true moral is consistency. For consistency is the only decipherable feature in nature's grand design. Consistency. Repetition. And what are patterns, if not repetition and consistency? And what is nature but patterns and consistency, so sublimely done over upon every single thing that we see, even unnoticeable at times? If you go outside and you stare at the bark of a tree, you might see small patterns, but it might not mimic itself perfectly. But then if you compare hundreds of that same genus of tree, and you compare the bark, even more consistent patterns will illuminate. Nature has an automatic desire to do this. And because we are human, because we are imperfect, because we are ourselves a part of these patterns, we are unable to perfectly replicate them, even though we want to. As I was saying, we have this desire to do it. That's why we're attracted to beauty. That's why we're attracted to art. And that's where our morals come from. We decide we will wear shoes to protect our feet. And it's been done over for so many thousands of years that then to not wear your shoes into a fancy restaurant, that's immoral. You are breaking the pattern that has been set forward. It's not a true pattern. Nature didn't put shoes on our feet. And I'm not saying walk around without shoes either. I love boots and shoes, as you all know. But we attempt to at least find patterns that we've created ourselves, and we enforce them as morals. There's another part, though, going back to beauty, that mimicry of beauty, that we can bring with patterns and repetitions. And I think that's where sewing, painting, sculpting, drawing holds such an important influence on us beings. Look at the repetitive motion as I sew in these buttons. The motion happens over and over and over. It's a pattern. I might not sew it the exact same way, in the exact same part of the vest each time, but over 100 repetitions of that same. And it builds up to all look like it was done in the same place. And the button holds in one place. It has become patterned. And that is where I will bring up once more the importance of, as I was saying, stretching and taking care of your mind. Because you could take that idea too far. There's something to say about all good philosophies or political ideologies being combinations of things, in between, a middle zone, but the really helpful ones being pushed too far, because you can take a glimpse at what happens when you push that too far. But you as a person don't want to have your ideas pushed too far, because then you lose them. Like I was saying, you wouldn't give away your bodily autonomy to someone else. So don't give away your mind to brash, brazen ideas. So have it all in moderation. It's good to think of these things. Maybe you can believe in them, depending on how solid of an idea you feel you have formed of reality. Once again, you aren't trying to create something new. You're not trying to even connect stuff. You're trying to have a lens. Morality is something, in this case, that has existed forever. What I've done here is I've created a new lens to look at, to analyze it, not to justify any morality, not to connect things in a hateful or harmful way, but to view something in a different light. Would failure or a collapse of the repetition be a collapse of morals? I think that could be seen as a very Germanic, Anglo way of looking at things, that failure is the end. It's over. But you only learn through failure. And like I was saying about the bark of a tree, that might not be wholly consistent along an entire tree, over hundreds and thousands of the tree from the same species or genus, it is there. So one small deviation, one small failure, as we would classify it in our crudely human words, is not the end. It could even be seen through a different lens as a point of departure for beauty, an irregularity, a uniqueness, not a failure. And so the same for the buttons. I just messed up right now. But it's still going to look the same in the end. And it still has the same amount of care and dedication and intention put into it. And it still has a cumulative amount of a repetitive motion to make sure that that one mistake truly does not matter. This is coffee. I don't drink. Anyways, almost like the last time I did one of these videos, I've spent so much time talking that I really have not got much sewing done. And I think this is a great stopping point. I feel like I've said everything I've sort of wanted to get out there. I would love to hear all of you comment, not just for interaction, you know that. I don't think I've ever, I can very proudly say this, I've been consistent with it. I've created a pattern, so it's moral. I've never asked for a like or subscribe on any of my videos, because I just don't think it's right. That's not the point of why something like this is done. It's not the point of why I release stuff. I want to teach. I've always wanted to teach, whether it's fashion history or something far more abstract like this, or mending your clothing, or art history, or a little bit of history on communism, like I did last time. But yes, this is a good point of departure. I would like you to comment, not for interactions, but because I truly would like to know how much each of you takes time in your day to just look at an object and reflect on it. And this is now even coming from a Buddhist lens, where you meditate on objects. I have, let's say, a rock that I will meditate on, understand its material. It's reflective, it's philosophic, it's meditative. How much time do you spend a day, a week, a month, and actually reflect on the objects around you, or try to view them through different lenses, or even concepts that you adhere to? Because adherence to concepts is good. There's a few lenses you could look. You could bring back my analogy of patterns. You could look at people like Kant, who believed to be truly free. The man who is truly free, or she that is truly free, is able to create rules for herself or himself and adhere to them. If I have the rule, I will not drive through a red light. You know, I guess that's actually a rule of the state or the country that you live in. But all of a sudden, it's late at night, deserted, no one on the road. You know no one's there. No one's going to see you. And the red is light, and you want to get on. Do you drive through it? If you do, Kant would say you aren't free because you're not adhering to a rule that maybe you set for yourself. Of course, it's very different when a state or a government does it. Then, at your own discretion. But if you set it for yourself, if you set that rule for yourself, you are truly free if you follow it then. One of those that I have for myself is if I see an ad for something, I will not watch it if it's a show or a movie, or I will not buy it if it's a product. And yes, it can be restraining on things, and there are exceptions. But in Immanuel Kant's eyes, I would be truly free. And in my lens or eyes, I'm adhering, I'm sticking to a pattern that I've formed, so it is moral. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you learned something, or at least got to think a little bit, or had this playing in the background while you do something. And 3, maybe 4 videos out fairly soon. As always, have an amazing